Welcome to Teacher Tuesday, and today's title is Retention in the Time of Remote Instruction. So today we have Mahalia Baldini, who is our Texas Workforce Commission AEL Interim Director. We also have Linda Ross from Temple College, Adult Education and Literacy Coordinator, Curriculum and Instruction, and Darlene Valls, who is SAISD Director for Adult and Community Education. Mahalia, I'll let you take it.
I want to just thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully some of you are repeat customers. We did a Teacher Tuesday last month and kind of kicked off this remote instruction piece that we wanted to do here for a couple of months and showcase some of the great things that are happening out in the field, and then also just give you guys some background on what we're doing here at the state level. So for those of you that are coming back for sort of the part two, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So today we're going to be kind of focusing on retention in the time of remote instruction. And this is a very timely topic, I think, for all of us. And we've got some great guest speakers today. And our guest speakers today, we've got Linda Ross from Temple College, AEL Coordinator of Curriculum and Instruction. And we also have Darlene Valls from San Antonio Independent School District. And she's the Director of Adult and Community Education out there working with her Educational Service Center Region 20. So I want to just thank them for coming and sharing their skills and their talents with us today. And let's go ahead and get started. So today's focus, I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk about and kind of go back a step and kind of talk about where we've come thus far. So for those of you joining us for the first time and may have missed out on some of the webinars that we've already had on Teacher Tuesday, and if you want to go back and look at them, I encourage you to do so. I believe they all are in the PD portal. So what we've really done since, I guess, the pandemic really hit back in March, and the way that kind of shook us all up moving into April, and trying to continue to have students that were, have a continuity of our service delivery that kept happening. We really put out a big push for this remote and distance learning options for all students. And that was happening very early on. We got guidance out. We were able to, I think, move pretty quickly to get you guys what you needed locally to create some local flexibilities in terms of updating processes, procedures, and things like that. The other big push was also for staff training on remote instruction, digital literacy, and also remote testing options. The way that the lay of the land was, and historically with our testing procedures, was all face-to-face. And so as soon as our NRS approved test came online to offer the remote proctored option, we wanted to make sure we got staff trained and our test administrators trained to be able to do that, even though we were also recognizing that, there's quite a few changes and much less students that you can do utilizing that option. But that was also a big push for us, and we were able to kind of get out there and get that done, relatively quickly. And then we moved to pushing for really developing plans for serving students remotely, not only during the pandemic, but also beyond. And that was something that I kind of stressed during our last monthly Teacher Tuesday. Was we really, in the process of doing this, it created a really wonderful opportunity for us. And that was to take everything that we're learning about transitioning students to a remote learning environment and student choice options for something that we can permanently build and have in place moving forward. So it kind of serves that purpose for what we needed it to happen. It needed to happen during the pandemic, but we're really trying to now focus on how do we sustain this long term? If you think about where we are and some of the retention issues that we've had in the past with students, largely have to do with supportive type services that, we currently are not providing, like transportation and childcare. So those are big hurdles for some of our students to actually physically, be in class and be engaged in class. So this remote learning option is a great opportunity for us to continue this, as just part of what we do in Texas AEL. So today is basically now what? All right, we're building it, and I want to stress that many of you that are joining us are going to be in different phases of development in terms of all of this. And our goal isn't at all to make you feel like you're behind the curve, but it's really about being very proactive. And for those early implementers, getting some of their best practices out there so that we can share that, so that as others of you are really building out these processes and really thinking about things locally, you have some sort of, peer connection. I'm at the state level. I really focus on allowing individuals that are doing the work kind of speak for itself, because they're going to have the best way to answer all these really weedy questions that you guys are going to have. And I really encourage you to ask those questions for our presenters today. So now what? Today is all about retaining, and originally I said students, but I threw staff in there too, because I think that's a really important piece that we also need to be focusing on, is how we're supporting staff. And that's you guys, the instructor level. So how do we retain staff and students when we have, this sort of changing environment of remote learning and distance education at the forefront? So just a little bit, again, talking about where we are and where we've been. So we were able to successfully transition 50% of our students that were kind of in brick and mortar classes getting contact hours in April or throughout the year. By April, we were able to kind of transition over 50% of them to remote or distance learning options. And that's a big feat. And I'll kind of show you some additional data here later on. But that was a big feat. But today, again, is going to be like, how do we keep these people engaged? How do we keep our students engaged in learning during this time? So some of the phases that have happened during the pandemic, early on, about March 18th, where everybody went into spring break, and we're kind of coming out of spring break, and all the real local mandates for the pandemic and social distancing came out. We immediately said, okay, we've got to expand our remote options for students because we don't want to lose students. So that came out very early. And then we had to kind of start to think about, well, we're continuing the current students that we have, but how do we get new students? When the pandemic hit, it wasn't just, AEL kind of living in a bubble. There's all these things that are happening around us, and many of you have been affected by those. You've got family members that have lost their jobs. You've got individuals, that, no longer are employed and are looking to increase their skills and do some upskilling, go back to getting their high school equivalency and focusing back on, themselves and things that they can do to get back into the marketplace for employment as quickly as possible. So we had to start thinking about, how are we going to serve new students, given the fact that we've got a whole system that's really built around face-to-face. That has to do with intake processes, how we assess students initially for eligibility. All of these things were really, the foundational structure was for face-to-face engagement with an individual. So we had to start thinking about opening the doors and making sure that the message that we had out there was, hey, we're open for business. Come and see us. But we had to kind of, be prepared for what we got in terms of students that were walking in our doors. And so the second piece there was really training staff on any new processes, any new procedures. I know many of you have probably just been inundated with, revisions to processes and revisions to things in terms of how the day, general day-to-day operations looks, so that we can accommodate this new environment that we're in. And then by April, remote testing. So we had this sort of new plan for remote testing and ensuring that we can continue to test students as they're coming in, and also a plan for students that maybe we just could not get that actual NRS test, that TABE test, that Best Plus test. So we had to have a sort of a new plan for how are we going to serve students when we actually can't test them, and how are we going to know what their educational levels are from an instructional standpoint. So that's all happening. So now we kind of get to this next phase. We're in a new program year, and we're here and we're trying to figure out how do we continue to do all of those phases leading up to this, and then also sort of add in this additional layer, which is student engagement and retention. So that's why we're having this webinar today, and we've invited the guest speakers that we have so they can talk about what they're doing, particularly related to that topic. Next slide. So student engagement and retention, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but a couple of things I did want to kind of point out is we have been sending out surveys since March to gather information for what's really happening out in the field. That's going to really help us do a couple of things. One is to create solid policy and solid, guidance from, a state perspective, but that is also not to, that's also, really meant to work in connection with all the local established expertise that you guys have. When you have policy from the state level, you're going to have some local policy and guidance that's being developed by, leaders at the instructional level, at the grantee level. And that's good because you've got to put policy into practice. And then once you put that policy into practice, you've got to really go back to the drawing board every so often and look at the data, right? And you have to look at what the data is kind of telling you about these processes and the policies that you have in place. Are they effective? Are they working? Are they getting you to the end goal that you really desire for them to be? And if they're not, you can't be afraid to kind of go back and say, all right, we need to tweak some things. We need to modify some things. So I expect that to continue to happen, not only at the state level, but also, locally for you guys as you're working through building all of this support system for students and for instructors. And the one thing I think is really positive, and Linda Ross, we were talking earlier this week about just prepping for this webinar. And we were talking earlier this week, and she said, one of our main goals for our students is we've got to create a positive, enriched environment for students. They are dealing with so much. They are having to, navigate through personal challenges, and, we want to create a really positive space for them. And that's very important, and you have to keep going back to it because, and I can tell you from my staff at the state level, the stress level is high, right? And you feel like the stakes are very high because we want to serve people. That's what we're here for. We want to help. So keeping that sort of positive environment alive during this time is crucial. So if you feel kind of like you are dealing with this situation, I know this is how I feel pretty much every day, like I can't, it's just like drinking through a fire hose, There's so much information to consume, and there's so much change that's constantly happening. And you'll get a policy, I know I do here at the state level, you'll kind of get one direction, and 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, we've rethought this, right? And that's part of it. And I really want you guys out there to embrace that, because this is just a time where we are unsure of a few things, and that's okay. So my message to you would just be, to continue to serve students in the capacity that we can. We're going to continue to be here for you and provide you with the best guidance that we can. So if you have days that you really feel like this, just know that you are not alone. I guess that's the message here that I'm trying to send. So with all of this sort of stuff happening and sort of everything kind of plate spinning around us, how are we actually doing? So I wanted to share a couple of data points with you. So what you're looking at here is really a comparison from PY 18-19 to PY 19-20, which is the year that we just closed out. So what you're looking at is really a comparison from the last program year, which we just closed out, to the year before that. And there's just a couple of things I wanted to point out, in particular, March. So if you're looking at the column that says March for both of those program years, what you're really looking at is the number of students who were receiving actual contact time during that month. So if you look at March from 18-19 in comparison to March 19-20, you can see that we were doing a little bit better, in 19-20. But if you move to April and you do the comparison of those 2 years, you can see that that's really when the pandemic hit. And that's really when we were, our students were largely impacted in terms of coming to class and being able to participate, because we really haven't built in this remote option yet. And then you'll look at May and June, and what I'm going to show you next is the increase in the number of distance learning students that were getting contact time. But this is just to sort of help you kind of understand, number one, what is our general enrollment cycle in a year when we're not dealing with a pandemic and we're not dealing with, some of these outside forces. So you can kind of see how we tend to trickle down starting in March in terms of just students being in class, being engaged, getting contact time, and getting, continuing to get instruction. One of the positive things, and as a result sort of the movement with the pandemic to distance learning options right off the bat, because that was already ready to go. We didn't have to build out the Zoom courses. We didn't have to transfer all the remote instruction. The distance learning was there. It's available. It's still available. And as a state, we are, not all the states in our national, organization have distance learning policies. Many states were stuck in a situation when the pandemic hit that they didn't even have distance learning curriculum that was approved for their providers to use. So that was a big disadvantage for them, but it was definitely an advantage for us, and the numbers speak for themselves. If you go down a couple of rows here, I'm going to talk about the last 4 rows. Or the last 3 rows. So when you're looking at the row that says number with proxy, and then it has 12 in parentheses, what that means is that these are the number of actual participants with 12 direct hours that were also generating proxy hours. So somewhere along the way, they accumulated their 12 direct hours of instruction, and then they were, signing in and doing their distance learning curriculum to also have contact time for proxy hours. The row after that, number with proxy hours, all. So this is the total number of individuals, regardless of whether they had the 12 direct hours of instruction, but they at least had proxy hours. And so you can see the differences and how many more students that we had in the program year comparison for students that were getting proxy hours. And the ultimate, result of that is that we had around a 9% increase overall in the number of individuals that were utilizing distance learning as an option. And I think if we broke this down further, we would largely see that kicked up probably in March and April as people were trying to kind of scramble to keep students engaged and continue to provide services when the pandemic hit. So here we are, and we're in a brand new program year. We're starting off strong, and you guys are such a big part of that. But with every new program year, I feel like we always have a few new challenges. And for us, these are a couple of things I just want you to kind of keep in the back of your mind, which is really how will we, and I'm framing all of these up as how will we? So how will we continue to expand our services to offer remote and distance learning options to current and new students? That's a big one, because again, going back to, earlier when I said this is about being responsive to the pandemic, but we also want to think beyond that. So new students coming in, how do we make this remote learning and this distance learning a student choice option permanently? The second one is a big one. How will we hire, train, and support instructors to meet the needs of students during this time? And that's a big piece, and Darlene is going to, Vols from SAISD is going to talk about that today, and they're going to talk about how they are sort of supporting their instructors there locally, because there's so much going on and it requires a great deal of support. So if you're out there right now and you're feeling, like you're drinking through a fire hose, just know that we're going to continue to work on how to create professional development that's going to support instructors during this time. And then we also have to think about building remote learning options, while still kind of remaining committed and focused on going back and having face-to-face instruction, hopefully here in the near future. that's sort of our historical model. We're not abandoning it, all hope of getting back there. So we have to be very mindful that that's still, something that we're working towards as well. Most importantly, how do we keep both students and staff engaged, right, while we're trying to meet these progressive milestones that we've created for ourselves? And that's really where we are today. So I want to go ahead and kick this off. I want to turn it over to Linda Ross, and I want to hear from our presenters on what they are doing locally to keep students and staff engaged. And Linda, if you are ready.
Hi, good afternoon. A little bit about Temple College. We're a fairly small grantee. We have about 20 part-time instructors that provide support for our ABE, HSE, ESL, and IET programs. We also have 2 part-time instructional leads. We serve approximately 1,400 students. This was pre-COVID days, and our service area includes Bell and Milam counties. Our subgrantee is Central Texas College out of Killeen, Texas. I believe I saw some participants join the call from CTC. So welcome everybody. I titled this presentation Communication Tools: Connect, Build Communities, and Educate. And the reason for that is really communication is critical to successfully connect with our students, build those positive classroom communities, and educate our students. This presentation is primarily going to focus on the Remind app communication tool that we use. It'll show how we use Remind to keep our staff as well as our students informed, engaged, and making progress. I put some examples of some actual messages that were sent to staff or students from Remind. You can send attachments, you can send photos, you can have text messaging enabled between students or just control it based roles. The key thing is that this is a very quick, meet you where you're at communication tool. And we use it for staff and class announcements. We use it to ensure that especially important time-sensitive information gets out to the population as quickly as possible. What studies have found is that people will typically review a text message, read it much faster than they do an email or respond to a telephone call. Another cool thing about the Remind application is that you can translate your message or your announcement up to 70 different languages. And I tell you, that has come in so handy for me as I have created and updated some enrollment forms, and I wanted to go ahead and have the translated version. Approximately 95 to 99% of text messages are opened and 90% are read within the first few minutes. And I'm going to show you an example of how you can actually see which of your announcements were read and by whom.
Linda, there's a question about, do you use the free version or do you use the paid version of Remind?
We started off with the free version and then we transitioned to the paid version. There are actually 3 versions: the free, the paid version, and then there's a paid premium version. We simply purchased the paid. There are 4 very important tabs in Remind, and I tell you, Remind is so easy to use. I'm amazed, and even though it's easy to use, there's a lot of functionality in Remind that I'm still learning. So, as we continue to use and really take advantage of all the tools features, I am very positive that we're going to see even better results in terms of our communication efforts. Over to the left of the screen, you can see the number of classes, or you can see a portion of classes joined. These are our fall classes that we recently created for each of the instructors that will be teaching this fall. We currently have about 38 active classrooms. It's easy to create a class. To create one, I would Sorry, I'm missing a screen there. I would go ahead and just say create a class, and it takes literally 1 to 2 minutes to create that class. It takes a little bit more time to add people to the class, the students to the class, but well worth it. Once again, part of the feature that Remind gives us is that when we send announcements out to staff or instructors or specific classrooms or individuals, we can also send attachments. Very nice feature. If I want to check which attachments or files have been sent to a specific classroom, for instance, perhaps it's citizenship or the ESL morning class, I can simply highlight the class and then look under files, and there will be a list of all the files that have been sent for that particular class. Under the People tab, I can see all the students that are registered or enrolled in that class. I can make notes about each individual student, notes that the student or other students don't see. These notes are private to me, just to help me in terms of, one, connecting better with the students, as well as having some additional information, especially at the beginning of classes. The Settings tab gives us a lot of options. For instance, we can require that the students receive an approval prior to joining a class. We can also say, as a student or a participant, we can choose how participants see and message others in the class. One of the things that we recommend is maybe at the very beginning of the class, until people begin getting used to this feature and seeing the functionality, have it based on students being able to message the instructor but not each other. And then shortly after, go ahead and expand that so that students can also message each other. This helps to build that community within the classroom.
Linda, there's another question. My limited use of Remind has only allowed very short messages. Is there a way to increase the amount of text you can have?
The paid version is one, and that too still has a limitation. But the thing that I would recommend is if you've got a lot of text that you want to share, perhaps summarize the announcement and then copy the remainder or the full text in a Word document or a text file, and then send that as an attachment.
Okay.
So that's one way around it. So right away you get their attention. Hey, here's the, very quick bullets. See attached for additional details.
Okay. And another question is, where is the notes feature? And then how do you delete students that have been dropped?
Okay, both of those functions are available, and they would be under the People tab. And I didn't actually show a screenshot of the People tab, but when you select it, you're going to look at it. You'll see a list of students. Highlight the student that you want to add a note to. When you highlight that student's name, on the right-hand side, you'll see an area to type in your notes. You'll also see some additional functionality relevant to that particular student's name that you highlighted, like remove from class. Moving on to statistics, this is part of the paid functionality of Remind, and to me it's so important because we started using the paid version the very latter part of December, and you can see just for last month, so when I say last month, I'm talking about July, over 3,670 messages were delivered. For the year, 44.5 thousand were delivered. And that's, once again, we started very late July 2019. This tells you the number of announcements and the number of conversations as well as reactions. You can look at this from a daily perspective, weekly or monthly. So it gives you a lot of insight in terms of what's happening. There are additional pieces of information under the Stat tab. That includes, you can download which instructors. It's more like a Remind messaging report that says it'll list all the instructors, how many classes they belong to, how many messages or announcements were sent. So it goes into a lot of detail. You can drill down to information, and it gives you a very good insight in terms of, one, is there frequent and enough communication and interaction going on between the students, the class, and the instructor?
There was one more question. Is there a way to change the student account in Remind from being listed as parent to student? They picked parent as they are a parent, but they are a student. For now, I just list them as a student in the notes area.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to the Remind statistics slide. So I'm showing you a portion of the screen here. On the left-hand side of the screen, it will list all the different classes you have. You can go ahead and highlight a class, or you can do it from the main. So for instance, this screen, I'm looking at the school, Temple College-AEL. If I want, I can go to the People tab. I can highlight the person listed in the People tab that I want to change the role. On the right-hand side of the screen, once again, some options will appear, and one would be to change the role. So I've had, matter of fact, and this is pretty much a new feature that I realized, wow, this is kind of easy to use. Why wasn't I using it sooner? But I was able to easily change probably about 50 people who had joined Remind as a parent to student, which made it a lot easier and less complicated when we were looking at the stats. Okay, I had mentioned earlier that you can see, you can get a summary of your announcements and see, how many people in the class open and read your announcement or your message. How many people did it get delivered to? Were there any delivery issues or errors? For instance, maybe something couldn't get delivered because of poor internet connection. Here's an example of an AEL staff class. This AEL staff announcement is listed, and I've highlighted the message summary. This particular announcement was sent to 33 people. You see this little drop down under Read? If I select that, I can see who the 96% of the staff were that opened and read the announcement. So one of the features I wish they would improve is show me who didn't read it. But at least with this feature, I can do process of elimination and find out who didn't read it and see if that's a consistent behavior. And that can apply to our students as well.
Okay, Linda, there's a couple of questions. Will your school Remind be automatically linked to other non-job related reminds, or are they kept separate?
To other non-job reminds, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the non-job related reminds, or are they kept separate?
So our school is kept separate.
Okay.
If I'm understanding the question correctly, yes.
And then are the AEL students given Temple College AID and other perks?
So yes, they are, but that's not a requirement of using the Remind application.
Okay.
So they have library privileges, they get a TC student badge, they get services like tutoring for writing as well as math. We have a circle of support for all our TC students. Okay. Another feature of Remind is, we have instructors, teachers, and staff all working different hours and perhaps different days, especially with our part-time staff. Another nice feature of Remind is that people can go ahead and set their office hours. So for instance, I've listed this as 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. available Monday through Friday. You know, if you were only working on Mondays and Wednesdays and you wanted your office hours set from 9 a.m. to 11, you could do so. It's completely customizable. Another nice feature is that, you know, sometimes our students are working throughout the night. When you set your office hours, this is kind of a reminder to students, hey, no, this is outside of office hours. Matter of fact, I went ahead for this particular slide, did this test so that I could show you what message pops up to the student, or anyone for that matter, who is sending a text or announcement outside of the office hours. And I thought this was pretty cool. Hey, it's pretty late. Do you want to send this message anyway? So you've got that feature available. Any additional questions about Remind before I go on?
Do you change these features on the app, or do you go somewhere else to change?
So I have Remind on my phone, but I also use my desktop. So on the desktop, I just go to the Remind URL and I can change it there. But I can also change it on the Remind app on my phone. I can decide to have notifications sent to my email, to my phone, or just to the website with a little notification pop-up. Okay, very quickly, I just wanted to say, besides Remind, there's so many other communication tools available, some free, some that we have to pay for. But the thing to remember is we are in a remote learning environment, but really the difference is there are not 4 physical walls that are containing us, and we need to be creative about how we are giving our classes so that they are engaging, so that students don't feel like it's simply a one-way discussion. That if we say our classes are 2 hours long, you know, we have a 2-hour-long class. Perhaps it's part lecture, perhaps it's in-class assignment, perhaps it's discussion, breakout rooms in Zoom, which, by the way, is a pretty nice feature because you know what? When you're in a real live classroom contained in 4 walls, sometimes groups can be very distracting. All the noise that you have to listen to very excited folks engaging in discussion. So besides Remind and communication, there are all these other tools that help us to really keep students engaged and making progress. I just wanted to show you 2 very quickly. This Kahoot is an example that was used in one of our ESL classes. The students just love it. It gives them an opportunity to be competitive, and it's fun. And they're learning at the same time. Flipgrid, here's another great tool. Here's an example of an instructor who said, I want you all to video yourself talking about something that you worked hard for and achieved. These students had so much fun doing this assignment and learning something new, as well as learning from each other and building that community, having that support, not just from the instructor, but each other. So final note, you know, you guys are great. It's with your great passion that the impossible does happen. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay, great.
There
Wonderful.
you go. Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to, share out a little bit about our programs. The San Antonio Independent School District Adult and Community Education Program typically serves about 1,000 students per year, a little bit more than actually 1,000 students per year. We are a very small team, full-time staffers. There's only 4 of us. It's myself, my 2 specialists, and my secretary. So it's a lot for us to manage, but somehow, some way we get it all done. I'm very fortunate that my 2 specialists have over 15 years of experience each. So that helps me a great deal. And we are a member of the consortium. So there's 8 members in the consortium to include ourselves. The Region 20 Alamo Consortium does a great deal to support us as well in our efforts. And we know that if we have any questions, we can always go to them for support. I also wanted to hone in on something that Mahalia said, We need to make sure that we're providing a positive environment for our students. But we also need to remember to provide a positive environment for our teachers. This is a very, very stressful time for everyone. And our teachers are equally as stressed because many of them had not provided online instruction before. And so, realizing this, I wanted to make sure when I was trying to create this model of support for them, I wanted to make sure that every step of the way that, I was trying to make every interaction with them very positive and, taking a lot of time to listen to them and to show that I cared about the way that they were feeling and the anxiety and stress that they were under. I know that we were going, through the same things, but, I took that extra time and that extra effort to do that with them. And I think that was in large part why we were so successful. So I titled my presentation, Teacher Support Equals Teacher Success, because, I really feel like without that support that you're not going to be successful. So, the first thing was building those relationships. Of course, I've been in the program 4 years, so I've had the luxury of already building relationships with teachers. But this was, something new and different for them. So I wanted to make sure that they knew that I was going to be available for them at all times. Every single time that they called me or emailed me, I was very responsive to their questions, which then in turn built that trust with them. At the same time, in speaking with them, I wanted to show them that, I cared about their feelings. I was listening very carefully. I was actively listening, making sure that I was understanding what their concerns were. And so I would repeat a lot back to them, what the concerns were, just to make sure that I was very supportive in that regard and that they felt understood. And then, of course, being very flexible and patient. We set timelines for things and deadlines, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. Life gets in the way. And so, just making sure that they knew that I understood that if they needed a little bit of extra time to get something done, that was possible for them. So laying that foundation was important. Then we started with our tree of support. Okay. This is the way I envisioned it in my head. I've got myself and my 2 specialists and then my teachers and students up there with the hands and the hearts. And, I just thought to myself, what do I need to do to make sure that they're feeling supported? So these were some of the bulleted points. Teamwork, of course, was important, providing a teacher toolbox, providing specific professional development for them. I'll go into more detail about what our teacher showcase entailed. We also provided initial additional prep time for our teachers to help them feel more prepared for this type of teaching. And then I protected their instructional time in the classroom, and I'll share more with you in the next couple of slides what that's about, and also providing additional tech support. So in regards to teamwork, we had several members of our team, administrators, teacher mentors, instructional coaches. These were the primary people that were supporting our teachers. In addition to, I'm going to include my career navigators in with those instructional coaches. But our administrator support involved, helping them with planning and implementing of effective strategies that they were going to be using online that was specific to online. So because that's just a lot different than teaching in person. And so there were some things that we needed to discuss that needed to be offered a little bit differently. Also, we offered additional technical support to them. And of course, program information that was coming down from the consortium and Texas Workforce Commission so that they would make sure that they followed all those guidelines that were being provided by them as well. In addition to that, just encouraging, caring, respectful of their needs. So those were some of the things that the administrators were providing to our teachers. The mentors, I allowed them to just connect with one another. I gave them all, of course, with permission, access to each other's contact information so that they could, support one another with the development of, these lessons, with the development of of their own experiences in the online platform. And so many of them got together and just kind of helped each other out. And I think it made them feel a little bit more confident and more secure that their own colleagues were, there to support them. The instructional coaches, of course, they're offering creative new approaches for lesson plan development, best teaching practices. They're assisting with training and data analysis and goal setting. So those instructional coaches are going to be critical to ongoing success with our teachers. And I always like this quote from Andrew Carnegie. Teamwork is the ability to work together towards a common vision, the ability to direct individual accomplishments towards organizational objectives. It's the fuel that allows common people to attain uncommon results. And so we did this so quickly and so fast that, I feel like without this framework of our team to help our teachers, we just wouldn't have been successful. So here's the teacher toolbox that I was talking about. So, there was many things that we included. All of this was included in our Google Drive. So I would highly recommend, if you don't have one location for your teachers to access information, I would highly recommend the Google Drive, because it has really worked out well for us. And we have a lot of information in there at their fingertips that they can easily access. So one of the things that we highlighted, of course, now that we may be going back to some in-person classroom practices, is the COVID-19 employee resources. So all of that is downloaded into our Google Drive. And we even have posters in there for them to print off and use, in the classrooms if they want. And then, we've trained them completely. We have a July Summer Summit every year that's a week long. And we just had that a couple weeks ago and trained them completely on what the district expects as well, because there are some district expectations. We explained our levels. So we've got 5 different levels in which we will decide when we're going to actually have in-person. In addition to that, we're going to be providing Canvas to our teachers here pretty soon. So we trained them on that. They have access to the Standards 2.0. All the content standards are downloaded into our Google Drive, and then all of our assessment resources are in there as well for our teachers. We also provided professional development that was very specific to remote instruction. So that first week, we actually transitioned in 1 week to online teaching. So that very first week they spent in PD, professional development. And we were very fortunate that our school district was also providing professional development. So they allowed us to join in with them. And they taught them things such as how to Zoom. They taught them about digital citizenship and safety training. We ended up going back later on and teaching them about Zoom tools for attendance. We use the chat for our attendance, and we record just in case something is missed or someone forgets to sign in the chat. So we do that as well. We taught them about the Remind app and shared additional TWC information and consortium information with them as well. And then we allowed them some time to reflect on what they learned. Then we decided that it might be a good idea, because some teachers were still struggling a little bit after a couple of weeks of instruction. We had a teacher showcase. And the teacher showcase allowed all of our online teachers to share out with one another about the different tools that they were utilizing in their classroom for remote instruction. And so this was a very valuable tool that was used, because not only did they really enjoy sharing out with each other, and it made them feel good, and it made them feel like they were doing some things right because they were getting feedback, immediate feedback from their colleagues. But in addition to that, we gave them a certificate for participating, and we provided this survey. And this is something that I hadn't heard a lot of programs doing, but we felt like it was important to get feedback from our teachers in regards to the challenges that they were encountering when they're teaching remotely, and what additional PD they would like us to provide to them, what additional resources So there was about 10 questions on this survey that we asked them that really helped us to make good decisions, good informed decisions in regards to what our teachers needed to provide better online instruction. In regards to the initial teacher prep time, basically what we did here is we provided our teachers with 5 additional hours of professional development. And in addition to the 30-minute prep that they would normally have right before class, we gave them 5 hours the first week before they got started of prep time to review resources in the Google Drive, watch recorded videos, join in with other instructors that were doing well, and 5 additional hours the second week. So they got 10 hours total of additional prep time to get started to make them feel secure in their online teaching. Then we provided additional tech support by way of, before the teacher even started teaching, we assessed their tech skills. Then we provided Zoom assistance. We also provided technology and teaching materials that were needed to include laptops. Then during the teaching, every single teacher, we Zoomed in with them on their initial day of teaching to help them with Zoom support in their Zoom room and help them to get students to sign in the chat and establish routines in the classroom and make sure that the lessons were being recorded. And then afterwards, we provided feedback to the teacher. We Zoomed additional times with the teacher if they felt like it was needed. And we assisted by helping them save the chats and the recordings if they still didn't know how to do it or were having some trouble. And then finally, protecting the instructional time. We decided in our program that instead of having the teachers do all these things that they had normally done, we would have the career navigators do that. So the career navigators now are connecting with the students initially when they first enter the program. They're providing help with the goal setting of the ITEC plans, COVID-19 safety. They're sharing all that information with them, Zoom norms before they get into the classroom, getting them logged into the Remind app so the teacher doesn't have to do that, providing the career interest survey, study skills lessons, learning style inventory, and very importantly, the digital citizenship and safety. So they're doing all that prior to them Zooming in with the teacher initially, so they have a firm foundation and won't have any issues, hopefully, once they get into the classroom.
Right. Darlene, there were a couple comments about would you be willing to share your survey and how many instructors do you have and are they part-time or full-time?
Unfortunately, we lost some instructors that didn't want to come back due to the COVID and some that didn't want to teach remotely as well. So now we're down to about 40 instructors and we are currently looking for more instructors at this time, specifically GED. So if anybody wants to join us, let me know. But we have the Teacher Showcase survey here. This is just a screenshot, but what I can do is I'll give you my email address and I will send you the whole thing. My email address is dboles@saisd.net. Okay, and I'll send you the whole Teacher Showcase. We did this in the office forms. So it's done online and then we get the results and we can do a little graph and it does all kinds of nice things. You can put it into an Excel spreadsheet and it's just, it's a cool feature to use, a cool tool.
All right. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say thanks so much to everybody that joined us today. And don't feel shy about, giving us some ideas for some new topics for Teacher Tuesday. We want to continue to have one of these every month so that we can just get directly to you guys straight from the state down and send us some good ideas and things that you want to have some best practices and discussions about. I'm happy to hear from you. Thanks a lot for joining us.